Monday morning in Happy Valley. I'm Chris Buchignani. He's Greg Woodman. This is Connect Happy Valley A.M. We're at Pine Grove Hall in beautiful Pine Grove Mills, Pennsylvania. Check them out at pinegrovehall.com. And it's the start of a big week here in the Valley, Greg. We got America 250 waiting for us at the end of this thing.
4th of July, Saturday. We have one of the best fireworks in the world this Saturday. It's 250. It's going to be a hot one.
July, that does tend to happen, does it not?
That's true. And then the week after, Arts Festival kicks off Wednesday through the Sunday evening. So we got 2 powerful weeks here in our slice of paradise.
Yeah, it's a little early, I feel, for Arts Fest this year, just because of the way the calendar falls, like 10th, 11th. That feels pretty early to me to have Arts Fest. That's a long time for that's the official start of my college football season. Sunday of Arts Fest, I go downtown, I try to pick up a copy of the Town and Gown Football Annual, and that's the beginning of college football season for me. I'm tacking on an extra week. I don't know if I like that so much.
Well, this June flew by. July 1 is Wednesday, and the students come back starting in early August, and classes start like August 26th. So appreciate every day we still have left before fall hits.
As far as I'm concerned, the students already came back. Summer session just started here at the University Park campus.
It did, and the Arts Festival, a lot of the students come back because most of them have 12-month leases, and so they come back to get that final July payment value statement to come back for they come back Thursday through Sunday. So looking forward to the influx for the students coming back for Arts Festival, a summer reunion.
And you mean that when you say you're looking forward to the influx. That's not something you grumble about or you see as the worst part of the summer. You, along with me, I think we're in alignment that we like it when the students come back to this college town we're privileged to live in.
Yes, what is the recipe of our paradise? What is the elixir, the special sauce that makes Happy Valley just a little bit better? And I feel it's the student energy. We call it the blue zone or the blue-white zone, is we get energy off of them. And then we come pouring back in. I look at this heat and I think of the beach. They bring that beach vibe into the town, and they're going to be coming to do one thing and one thing only: reunite, connect, and certainly have a big summer reunion party. And it's just fun to walk around and be a part of it.
Now, this has been this analogy I've heard you use for years now, that we are a beachfront town and College Avenue is the boardwalk and Penn State is the ocean. It's the attraction that draws people in. Now, what I am curious about is, since you have lived here in Happy Valley for many decades, Greg, and you've been using that analogy, that very comparison, for as long as I've known you, and I think that probably dates all the way back to, we've talked about before on this program, your discovery of Penn State when you arrived here from Western Pennsylvania as an undergrad. How is that received by our local population? Because you and I had a little bit of fun poking at each other on Friday. Stressed my mom out, apparently. She does not like it when I'm debating people. She's always worried that I'm offending you. So can you please reassure my mom that you're not offended when we have a little friendly argument?
Mrs. Buchignani, that was a fun discussion on Friday.
Yes, thank you.
And Chris also plays the mock debater, which brings
devil's advocate, right?
Devil's advocate, and I enjoyed it. And we got a lot of comments about Friday.
Yeah, we had a good time kind of going back and forth about how do the people of the Valley actually view the university, and how does the university view them? What's the relationship between the town and the gown? And so to me, when you bring up this boardwalk analogy, I love it. Obviously, I think if you're going to live in a college town, you should probably be mentally prepared for the reality that there will be a college in it, especially one that happens to be named State College. I feel like that's a pretty obvious fact that a rational person could be prepared for. And yet, many of our friends and neighbors who we love very much seem to appreciate everything about the college town except said college. So when you describe Penn State as the ocean, is that generally well received, or is it more of a mixed bag?
a lot of people nod, and you know, they complain there's all T-shirt shops on College Avenue, and then I'll bring in the boardwalk. And I grew up going to the beach down in the southern New Jersey beaches, Wildwood, and Mr. Peanut would walk along the boardwalk and frighten me. This life-size figure. So there should
Like
be
like the Planters Peanut
the
Man?
Planet's Peanut Man. That's when I was first introduced to a live, iconic symbol of a brand. And that guy scared me with his little eyepiece and his cane. And my parents used to tease me that I'd run from the Peanut Man. But maybe that led me into do the Cardboard Joe Paterno. I have some kind of freakish fascination with cardboard life-size figures or characters or brands, icons.
Well, you and I joke about my terminology of costumed Disney characters, that the real characters of State College, I said, are like the costumed characters that walk around Disney World. So people like Bill Clark and Mike the Mailman, they're Disney characters. There you go. You just a monocle, by the way.
A
is
monocle.
what you're describing. So your days at the Wildwood Beach, seeing the gigantic, horrifying Mr. Peanut, that actually planted that seed
Pun
that led you
intended.
to gravitate to this town full of Disney characters.
Exactly, but it's more that I probably empathy, the feelings you get, the special feelings you get when you're with your family, you're at Virginia Beach, Outer Banks, Wildwood Crest in New Jersey. You know, I've always been hypersensitive to the feelings and emotions you feel. That's why I say Connect Happy Valley equals tailgating. You know, talking about feelings and emotions. So the ocean being Penn State, when I came here as a freshman, and I could go into these I.M. buildings, and there was glass backboards that I had access to pretty much any day of the week, and I could get into a pickup game. That feeling and emotion was very similar to me, you know, using a boogie board at a beach, being around my family. You know, and my sister was here, a couple years older than me, so I just had that feeling coming here from the South Hills of Pittsburgh, started winter trimester, and I could go to and play basketball, or I could go to a dining hall that was a buffet that I had only gone to when I worked at the country club. I was a waiter at a country club, and that buffet, you know, was just so, you know, awe-struck for me. So yes, Penn State is the ocean to me, full of entertainment, but more importantly, College Avenue, and then I got to be able to be 21 and go to the bar scene and the train station and the Herlocker mustard and the grilled stickies and the year-old diner. No coincidence, 50 years later, I'm on a stage talking about feelings and emotions in an attempt to connect the alums back here into each other and that locals to get out and enjoy flourishing human connection.
Telling the story of Happy Valley. That's exactly what we're doing every morning, 9 to 10 a.m., live from Pine Grove Hall here on Connect Happy Valley A.M. As an aside, you brought up the dining commons. Have you been inside any of the renovated Penn State dormitory complex dining halls recently?
Well, people ask me why I love Happy Valley. It's infrastructure. And they always get shocked more when I say infrastructure versus Penn State football. It's the infrastructure. So yes, the dining halls, just like every building, every part of this community, we joke that the official bird of Happy Valley is the crane because we have cranes everywhere building and improving. You mentioned the Arboretum Friday. I mean, that wasn't here, 15 years ago?
Yeah, correct.
And you go to that and you have to say, why did we build this? Why is it so beautiful? Like, what does this have to do with higher education? On the drawing boards is a planetarium out there. You know, so the dining halls, yes, they're a Four Seasons buffet line. Everything's custom.
So when
amazing.
you and I were in school, dining commons looked, in my opinion, how dining commons ought to look. Like a low security prison cafeteria in the nicest possible way, right? But nobody ever would confuse a Penn State dining commons, which to your point still had all the, you know, the all you can eat, the buffet, the creamery ice cream, the cereal bar, all the amazing stuff. No one would ever confuse that with a restaurant. It was a big old cafeteria like you maybe had in high school with probably less color to it and bunch tables and a lunch line, and that was it. It was a dormitory dining commons. Yes, this was your experience.
Yes, but I enjoyed the all-you-can-eat aspect, and I gained the freshman 10, quickly
Yeah,
because of
sure.
all, but what
But
fascinates
the
me.
core, Greg, is the point I am trying to make here. It looked like a cafeteria, as we would all imagine it. That is not how they are
now it's
quite the opposite.
Now it's exotic, but getting back to our vision and mission here. What?
You're not taking the bait on this. Okay, go.
So yes,
Go.
it's exotic now. It's extravagant. It's a Four Seasons buffet line, and that's what's happened to colleges. They're cruise ships for students. Some take calculus, some don't. But it's a summer camp, and guess what? We're advocating that Penn State leans into the fact that this is a socializing summer camp. You just have two tracks, one with calculus, one without. But I want to say something about the dining halls, and since I privileged and blessed to work with these students, and I've also worked with fraternities. The thing that's different about when you were in the dining halls and when I was in the dining hall, we were only allowed to take one piece of fruit when we left the dining hall.
That's right. They had signs. They had big signs up everywhere. You could do pretty much whatever you wanted, eat whatever you wanted within the confines of that room. But so help me God, not more than one piece of fruit. It just seemed like an arbitrary rule to so stridently enforce. But yeah, it was a big deal. Only one piece of fruit, one orange or one banana, not both.
It was a big deal, and necessity being the mother of invention, people would bring their backpacks in and have all kinds of clever ways.
It was a challenge. Those signs were, it was like they were baiting you.
Yeah, they were baiting you to be clever, to be inventive, innovative, to be able to take a second piece of fruit or to stick a chicken Cosmo in a paper bag and throw it in your book bag or something, or hide it in a book. But nowadays, and I'm sad to report this, and this is why we're on this stage, is the students now have unlimited ability to take all of their food back to the dining room. And guess what they do? They get their containers and they eat often alone. And so when you go into a dining hall, despite all the custom omelet stations, custom personal pan pizzas they make with all your fixings, the dining halls for the most part are empty. We used to go in there and it was like a big tailgate, tables of 8, people joking, people just, discussing human connection. Now they take their food back to their room. And that's a common thing of how some people grow up. With the travel sports and things, you will go eat on your screen. One young man said the food wouldn't taste as good if he wasn't watching a movie back in his room. Now, we're here on a stage. There's no AI here. We're having a discussion, and that's not happening in the dorms, And so we're attempting here to promote human connection and the human connection and coming into these third places like a dining room and hanging out with 6 to 8 buddies, joking. That was the best part of the day.
All right, you've given me a good thread to pull on, Woodman. I like this because I think it does play into some of the other discussions that we've had on this show about the nature of higher education, the nature of human interaction in 2026, and how is it all relevant to Happy Valley? Well, again, going back to what I've said at the top of the show, whether you like it or not, when you're in a college town named State College, the fortunes of the college, the fiscal fortunes of the college are very much the fiscal fortunes of your community. So I do think it's useful for all of us who live here on the beachfront property when the ocean is Penn State to consider. We're sure that the ocean is healthy, right? It's not going to dry up. So just a discussion about where higher ed is going, that's important. Connect Happy Valley is so named because its mission is to connect people, both the people of the place and those who are going to come visit it, with all that it has to offer, which is Legion. And so here we are talking about the difference between the dining commons, the low security prison cafeterias of our era, and now the beautiful restaurant style plush seating and sushi bars and well, pizza stations and everything that they have in Pollock Dining Commons now, which renders it totally unrecognizable to me. And yet, when we were all gathering together with our buddies from the dorms or whatever class we took together and going to the prison cafeteria, we were sitting at the table, having fun, having conversations, laughing when Brandon Short and the other football players made fun of anybody anytime they dropped a piece of silverware on the floor. It was a social experience. Now, objectively, the decor, the atmosphere, the experience of Pollock Dining Commons is orders of magnitude better than it was when I was an undergrad almost 30 years ago now. And yet, what you're telling me is that it sits empty because everybody is allowed to take their food back to their room. And not only can they bowl alone, they can eat alone, watching Netflix while they enjoy their chicken planks or their creamery ice cream or their stir fry from the stir fry station or whatever they got. And you alluded to earlier that we are on this show kind of making one of our platform planks of Connect Happy Valley, not chicken planks, but platform planks, that higher ed's future is going to necessarily require, as Neely wrote in Forbes the other day, soft skills development, the ability for humans to be adaptable and to interact with other humans. So do you think, Greg, in the name of serving the student population with maybe what it needs most in this decade and also buttressing the value proposition of residential higher ed, we can include in our platform a return to the one piece of fruit policy?
Unintended consequences that forced us to socialize. Perhaps we have to put rules in like that. But just to bring upon that topic, the new movie Toy Story 5. Do you know the thesis of the movie that is a box office sensation? And that first Toy Story, I was reading this morning, came out in 1995.
I don't. I checked out after Toy Story 3. They should have stopped.
Oh, I think
right
it did
there.
70 million last week. Yeah. And the villain in the story is very interesting to me, is an iPad named Lilypad, which is an animated character that is stealing the kids from playing with toys. The villain, and I'm sure, I haven't seen the movie, but I just realized that, back in 1995 when it first came out, the internet, Google didn't start till 1998. So the premise of that story with Pixar is, these kids play with toys, and I was home visiting my 93-year-old mom who lives independently, talking about all the Army men I played with as a kid. And I did not know the Toy Story theory, but it's called Lilypad, is the enemy of the kids play on the pad, the digital screens.
Too much screen time.
So, and I start thinking, boy, if I was a parent now, when do you, this whole thing globally is, the social media and the pads and the techno and the digital and, and the fact that these kids are eating alone in college that, I teach an entrepreneur class and a student here at Penn State came up with an app to fix this dining hall problem. It was called Meet and Eat. And he came into my class to speak and he had an app and he said, well, and that's when I was introduced that nobody eats together in the dining hall. He goes, I'm going to set up like a dating app or I can text my roommate that we're going to go meet at Finley Dining Hall and eat at 5:30. And now classes go till 9 o'clock at night. So that's another thing. I mean, there's just so many things that pull us away from socialization.
Yeah.
And so leaning for Penn State, and Neely, our president, is saying we're going to lean into experiential learning, soft skills. Now, there's a lot of pushback to that word soft skills now, because now they're the most important skills, so don't call them soft. So now the zeitgeist is we're going to, the humanities are roaring back in higher education, as I'm reading over the weekend. It's all getting back to what? Socrates, or just sitting around in Ben Franklin and having a beer with Ben, or the number one skills that somehow we professors in Penn State and this tenured world of faculty, they have to learn that everything is shifted to that. So how are we going to adjust as a university? Neely can put out the Forbes article, but the devil's in the details of how you shift your curriculum to beat the lily pad, to beat the AI, the villain that has sucked our social skills away, that we want to bring that back. And that's our only value prop as an educational company town of Penn State, the ocean. And by the way, our ocean is booming. I don't know if you saw last week that more students accepted this year. Our yield is way too high, and all the students are going to be jammed into supplemental housing. So the tea leaves are showing that they probably overread the fact that AI is destroying the value of education because everybody's moving to Penn State. We don't know what to do with all the students that have accepted that we didn't think would accept, and now we have too many students. Anyway, I just threw that out there.
Well, to the point of the contrast between dining commons when I was in school and the way they look now, the kids I envy the most are the ones who are going to get thrown into supplemental housing, the ones who are going to be in a study hall with a cot with 5 other strangers. And I tweeted this out over the weekend, and I got some good play on it with that story. I said, kids, all you need is a study hall and a cot to have the time of your life. And I was walking down Pollock Road last week, and they are beginning the renovation of Pollock residence halls. And it makes me very sad. It makes me sad what they did to East Halls, and now they are going to similarly disfigure the great Soviet prison-style housing of Pollock dorms. These buildings are too nice. They are too beautiful. Your college dorm should have an almost monastic quality to it. I want very Spartan, very simple. Frankly, I wish I could go back to the way it was when my uncle, who was in school here in the 1960s, who, by the way, is going to be up visiting Happy Valley this week. I'm very excited to go out to dinner with my aunt and my uncle and take them around town. And they only had one telephone for the whole hallway. There should be a little bit of that. These rooms are air conditioned. I mean, it's like basically luxury housing for these kids. Your air conditioner should be a box fan in the window. There should be a little adversity, a little discomfort to living together in your college years. Don't you agree, Greg? It builds camaraderie. It builds character.
I lived in East Halls, and now I'm understanding your reference to a prison. But at the time, I thought it was great to have a single bed. 4 feet over was another person with a single bed. We had 2 desks. That's all you needed.
Deal with it. Have a little discomfort in these early years of your life when you have probably higher carrying capacity for it, and understand that existence is not going to be a cradle to grave pleasure cruise.
Well, but if you look at houses in College Heights built in the late 40s, 1950s, the closets have room for 5 items. So you go back to East Halls, circa, in my case, 1978, 77, and you go back to the house that I'm living in now, the closets were so small. And spending the weekend with my mother, we talked a lot about the Depression and how they raised rabbits. And, just most children today are raised in a single large bedroom. They're not used to having 2 brother living in the same room. So things have changed. I know the FIFA World Cup is introducing America to the world again, and they are surprised at how luxury of 2-car garages and so we're abundant. Things are abundant. And yes, to your point, we've lost a lot of that socialization of living together. I lived in a fraternity room. I had 3 other roommates. We had 4 people. We were hanging beds with chains from the ceiling, and we'd put our desk and couch underneath it, and that was a blast.
I was just going to say, and you're nostalgic for those times, and always will be.
Oh, it's just like camping. I mean, it was just camping out, which is a great time. Back to the ocean.
I don't want to spend too much time belaboring the point on this wonderful Happy Valley morning, but since we have been hitting on these themes repeatedly, socialization and how it's changing, higher ed and what is its future, I do worry a little bit about the long-term viability of a model whose essence is captured by this need to renovate, modernize, and add luxury to the dormitories. And that's this notion that in order to keep the money flowing and the bills getting paid at our big universities, that we have to sell the luxury vacation experience of college. Like less that it's a formative time in your life that prepares you both for a profession and to be a fully formed human being, and more that it's a 4-year pleasure cruise.
Well,
Don't love it. I don't know that it's sustainable long term, and I definitely question whether or not it's healthy for anyone involved, especially the paying customers, which is a terrible way to describe students, frankly.
well, but the beauty of capitalism is that the paying customer will dictate, like it did with the railroad industry, where things will be going in higher education. And this weekend, big stories all over. Virginia's going to the legislation to go to a 3-year degree. They want to take it from 125 to 132 credits down to 90 credits. So the 3-year degree is out of the box and coming. I had been saying that for many, many years, because the students show up in August and they leave by the end of April, and they're gone multiple weeks on spring and fall vacation and the Christmas holiday. The price is going to dictate. And when you talk about the luxurious ocean value, the prices in Purdue's a great model. I talk a lot about Costco. It's high quality, low price. People love it. Get speed, quality, price, pick two. I think higher education has to go high quality, lower price, and we're going to go to 3-year degrees. We're going to maybe cut back on the cranes building and having everything. Like, people want a credential. Google's going to be credentialing you. Walmart's going to be, Elon Musk, so there's some real good competition going out there, which drives innovation and drives smart decision making. You talk to Town and Gown, so I'm optimistic that Penn State is positioned quite well if trustees and we read the tea leaves and meet the moment, meet the market, meet the parental needs to have their children credentialed. And is it luxury that they need, or is it just the degree?
Well,
and if soft skills are the name of the game, put them 4 in a room.
see, the thing is, I would answer your question by saying neither one should be the focus. It definitely shouldn't be the luxury, and the degree is obviously important, but we diminish the value of our own product if we reduce it to nothing more than a credentialization process that is just a funnel to the workforce. And you and I talked about it last week, I think, that if it is that and only that, eventually Amazon and Google will say, well, let's just internalize that process in our company, and we'll get the kids producing value for us from 18 on instead of waiting until they're 22. I just want to go back and in that vein, just say shame on me this morning for using the term or using the analogy of a supplier-customer relationship to describe the connection between alma mater and students. That, to me, is one of my cardinal sins, is to reduce that relationship to that of a customer. I think that's in many ways how we got into a lot of the problems that are plaguing our society today, to say that it is nothing more than this transactional consumer-supplier relationship. It's more than that. It needs to be more than that. And when you talk about soft skills development, there needs to be some authentic investment in the humanity of the young men and women we are bringing to Penn State and the impact we're going to have on them vis-a-vis their fulsome human nature, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years that they spend here. And so, anyway, anybody who, God love you, watching this program this morning, heard me use the term customer to describe students, like that is that's 5 slaps across my knuckles with a ruler.
Well, why? Why, Chris? Why is that bad to say that we have 700,000 alums who have gone through this university, who have a credential, and we talk a lot on this show about why they still love Happy Valley,
Well, you-
love Penn State, and it's a sense of belonging.
You went to go see your mom this weekend, 93 years young. Now, your parents, they helped provide for you your food, shelter, clothing, your upbringing, yes.
Lots of love.
Have you ever described yourself as a customer of your parents? Have you ever thought of yourself that way?
Go on. Tell us more.
Well, I presume
No,
the answer is no.
The answer
Yes.
is no. The answer is no.
And what does alma mater mean?
What does it mean?
It means dear mother.
Okay.
Because the idea is that your biological mother births you into the world, and your second mother, your alma mater, births you into adulthood. And listen, I'm not naive. I understand these are lofty and abstract concepts that the vast, vast majority of folks on both sides of the transaction, which in most cases is what it is, of modern college at Penn State and elsewhere, the students and the faculty and administrators would look at me like I had 7 heads with 8 eyeballs apiece if I said something like that. Nevertheless, if we don't have backstopping the notion of college, if there is not floating around somewhere in the ether this idea that this is something more meaningful, of greater depth and significance and weight than when I go to Walmart and choose between Aquafresh and Crest, then number one, we're just choosing. We're choosing to voluntarily impoverish ourselves and our experience, our life experience, and that shouldn't be an attractive proposition to anyone. But what's more, I do think we are setting ourselves up for failure, because if it is nothing more than a puerile financial transaction, we are putting a very, very high price point on that air-conditioned dorms and commissaries that let you take as many pieces of fruit out as you like probably can't measure up over the long term as the economy changes and the budgets get tight.
You use the word transformation, and so maybe we're getting down to alma mater. What does alma mater mean again?
Dear mother.
Dear mother. And the difference between a transaction and a transformational relationship. And we talked about Steinmetz, about value and where you put the X, and the knowledge of what is value. I think that's part of our reason to create Connect Happy Valley and have a show. Is at the root of this, we're talking about the meaning of life. We're talking about what is valuable. What is a transformational higher ed educational experience. And for you and me, we've talked a lot about this. My transformation here at Penn State came about through the extracurricular activities. Through intramurals, through joining a social fraternity and learning leadership and learning how to lead 45 colleagues in a co-op atmosphere. This is the hallmark as we celebrate our 250th anniversary of the Junto, of people coming together for the betterment of all, something bigger than ourselves. That's where my transformation, where I was able to have this work study. I'd have a classroom where I'd learn advertising, and then I had a small business, and I go to my fraternity, which was a part of recruiting. We learned budgeting. So I think Penn State, leaning into what are called soft skills, is our unique selling proposition, which will have this alma mater feel. And perhaps over the last decade, as we've gotten bigger as a university, it became a bit of a factory. It became a little more transactional. And that's why the giving of the last decade is not as great as it has in prior decades, because it was more of a transaction. Students are leaving in higher student debt. A lot of them are saying they didn't get the value because they didn't get the transformational experience.
Right. So the reason I brought up the question about have you ever thought of yourself as a customer of your parents, but brought out the number of things your parents do for you in your life, your caregiver, your guardian, whatever, there is a transactional aspect to that relationship, right? My daughter is entering into her teenage years now, and it is very clear to me when she has identified the transactional aspects of the parent-child relationship and is leveraging them. I'm not denying that. But the reason why I don't view her as my customer and she would never think of herself that way is because there's greater depth and more meaning to that relationship. It is beyond, over and above the transactional aspects. And I would argue that to get the most out of higher ed, and once again, to backstop the increasingly high price tag of it, we ought to be challenging ourselves to make it more than a consumer supplier transaction. And you talked about the older generations of people who willingly gave back very generously to support the growth and success of Penn State and how those numbers have nosedived for succeeding generations. Well, if I could go back and somehow track at what point we decided to ditch all the lofty alma mater stuff and just said, okay, you are nothing more than, as Penn State President Oswald described it, customers who select your courses off the shelf as if you were at a grocery store and pay at the registrar. Is there any surprise then that once you bought your Aquafresh or your saltines or your frozen chicken fingers, you don't then get home and say, boy, what a meaningful experience. You know what? I'd really like to, now that I'm out in the real world, go back and donate some money back to the Weiss markets because I had just such a great shopping experience while I was there.
Well, you have my head spinning because my oldest boy, I've been in the fundraising business, still am, when he went to a small liberal arts college, where statistically in a small liberal arts college, the annual gift is in the 50%. 50% of students who graduate from a small liberal arts college will give, half of them will give. In a large university like Penn State, it's down to like 18, 16%. Just because, smaller colleges, 10-to-1 ratio with a professor who you have a relationship with versus a 300 forum class. He pretty much said, Dad, I don't understand why people would give back.
Well, when you enter into that sort of purely transactional relationship, where from the outset, it's all but spoken aloud, folks, this is a mutual extraction. You need to get to the workforce and get a job and would maybe like to have a 3 or 4 year vacation on your way to it. So in order to do that, we have, as a society, erected this process by which you have been told you must achieve this credential, which we're able to give you. So you need to extract that value from us. And in return, we will extract copious amounts of financial benefit vis-a-vis your tuition, which in many cases you have assumed 5 and sometimes even 6 figures worth of non-dischargeable debt to pay. And we'll all just kind of float along with the understanding that this is nothing more than a mildly mutually abusive relationship. Does that seem like the sort of thing that 10, 20 years down the line would inspire, philanthropic affection in your heart? No, it seems like I'm going to the grocery store and I'm deciding, do I want Chips Ahoy or do I want Oreos? And it was not that long ago. While you were in school, we had a president who explicitly described college as that. You're going to the grocery store and you're shopping for classes off the shelf and you're paying at the registrar. What a pathetic, myopic, reductivist view of what could be a lot closer to a deep, meaningful, lifelong relationship that somebody like Bill Schreier had with Penn State. Then unfortunately, the kids who are brought here now to say, hey, you know what, you're just picking your classes off the grocery store shelf. And to the extent that you get anything more out of it, we're maybe just drifting off fumes of a different time when there was more depth and meaning to what you are now just going through the motions doing. And what I just described feels a hell of a lot like most institutions in our society right now.
Well, I think...
And I'm not saying it, by the way, just real quickly, I'm not saying it to be fatalistic. It's a challenge. to say we should get excited by the fact that there's an opportunity, if we recognize it, to reinvigorate these institutions. And all we have to do is just get up off our butts and do it. We could do it right now. I hope we're doing it in our own humble fashion with Connect Happy Valley A.M, 9 to 10 in the morning, Monday through Friday, live at Pine Grove Hall.
Well, this Saturday is our 250th birthday of America, USA. They're coming to America. How did those guys pull it off? You know, you've seemed to have been reading the tea leaves here, this thing about transaction. What's the opposite of a transaction? If there's a transaction, and we've gone more transactional, and certainly society has gone more transactional. The opposite of a transaction, is it love? Is it a relationship? Is it a value system of mutual benefit versus a transaction?
Well, I think 2 consecutive head football coaches we have had here, in Matt Campbell and James Franklin, and certainly both of them living on in the tradition of Joe Paterno, who all 3 of them believed that college football could be, even as the big business that it is, something more than purely transactional. Both of them, both guys who I think seem probably not made for the moment in where their profession and where the sport is going, they talk about transformational versus transactional experiences. And I think there's a lesson inherent in that all of us could probably do to sit back and examine.
So is there a meter? Like there's transaction and transaction versus care versus love versus a mutually beneficial transformational relationship. You know, and so as an entrepreneur, you know, with AI here and more transactional type of robotic world we're going to, the counterbalance to that is human connection, human flourishing, the humanities. You know, so certainly Connect Happy Valley, our vision and mission is to be the counterbalance to that, that our value system is connecting humans to one another through third places, through tailgating, through your alma mater, through family, through, you know, and I'm getting some pushback when I say this is Disney World North. People are saying, hey, Greg, we don't want to be Disney World North. You know, Disney World's a manufactured experience. We're talking about in real life curated in a transformational college town, which I was transformed having gone through here. You were transformed. Many of the 700,000 alums would consider this a transformational experience. The teachers who really love and care for teaching, they wouldn't be doing it unless they didn't feel they were making an impact to transform these young, impressionable 18, 19-year-olds who come here to be transformed. And we are very sensitive to what they're paying. And those that care and love are the best ones. And we develop relationships with students and in the hope that this is a transformational experience. And they will pay it forward perhaps 10, 20, 30 years as we plant these seeds. But that's why I love Happy Valley, is when we talk about these students, because they are here to be transformed and they're here to learn, and it's just fun to watch them and be a part of their lives.
I couldn't agree more, and I don't want to come across like I am nihilistic or pessimistic about the future of Penn State or higher ed or today's undergrad. There's 40,000 plus kids at Penn State in any given moment, and you just alluded to the fact that enrollment's going up. And any sample size that large of human beings is going to have a lot of dopes and losers in it. That's just the way the math works. And yet, I find people say, oh, I met some kid who's a student at Penn State, and he seemed like kind of a dummy. And I said, yeah, okay, and if you scoop out 45,000 people from any population anywhere on the world and randomly select one, like, guess what? Odds are you might find a dummy that is not indicative of the entire population. I have had, as have you, probably even more so than me, because you teach every semester, classes of 30 plus kids per section. Terrific experiences with unbelievable young people that, again, we're just so privileged to have share our home with us for a period of time when they come here to Penn State, and they infuse it with dynamism and energy, and not to mention a little bit of the old green as well. Even if it's coming through mom and dad, it's helping facilitate our lifestyle here. So I don't want any of this to come across as overly negative. I think you got to be realistic about your problems. if you're going to tackle them successfully, and I do think there are some problems, potentially some significant ones. I think there are viewpoints that I have that I can articulate in a way that gets people to think about common issues and regular things in their lives maybe differently than they would otherwise. And that's all I'm endeavoring to do. You talk about third places and you talk about Happy Valley as a special place and college as a special time in your life. I don't have any of these ideas in my head if it were not for long, meandering philosophical discussions over craft beer before it was a thing at Zeno's Pub over many years when I was a younger man. And so this is the type of place where that magic can happen. And that's where the value is. And that's where the transformation versus transaction takes place. And we ought to see it and we ought to appreciate it. And we maybe ought to be more intentional about it, because that's what's going to keep this experiment in education, which is itself an outgrowth of an experiment in human governance. It's celebrating its 250th anniversary this coming weekend, afloat. And the challenge for me, Greg, is as somebody who is, as you know, in many ways, like very practical, very execution oriented, get it done, but also somebody who likes to actually have some depth and thought and meaning behind those actions. I'm not just repeating process, is how do I strike that warrior poet balance where a lot of people are going to hear me talk about things like, oh, alma mater means dear mother, and this has to be more than a transactional relationship, and there has to be meaning extracted from higher ed, and they're going to think it's touchy-feely nonsense that has absolutely no practical application to most of the things that someone who graduates with a useful degree from Penn State needs to focus on, which is science and engineering and you know, whatever, pre-med or finance. Yes, all of those things are important. But to me, don't you want them to mean something? Don't you want to be a little bit more than an organic robot executing algorithms? Don't you want to have a little depth and a little color to the world you inhabit? So why not both? Why not say that the reason why we take action is because we can see and feel and appreciate and contemplate the meaning that makes those actions worthwhile. That's what higher ed ought to be doing. And I just don't want to feel like a complete weirdo, like I'm a man from Mars for having the audacity to suggest that it ought to be something more than choosing between toothpaste brands in the grocery store aisle. And that's my mission in life, to strike that balance.
Well, and you're very, you say you want to leave Happy Valley better than you found it. You know, and that's very beyond noble. It's back to America 250. You know, what did John Kennedy say? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. What is an Amish co-op? What is a farmer's co-op? It's a collaboration. What is the dairy co-op that gave us the campaign Got Milk? It's when we pull our resources and we contribute, not extract, but to give into making something better. You know, so as we're here bloviating, as you would say, for an hour, there's a meter of care, there's a meter of love, you know, and we talk about, you know, my background in consumer brands. As I opened the show today saying I was studying the feelings and emotions of, as I moved around the country from St. Louis to Philadelphia to Connecticut to Pittsburgh, and you had that hometown pride. You had your hometown sports. You know, I had a rapid youth of being plopped into new locations where I adopted and through agility learned to love the New York Knicks, the New York Mets. And then I moved to Pittsburgh and you love the Pirates and the Steelers. And I was born in St. Louis and the Cardinals, you know, and the Philadelphia Phillies with Richie Allen, you know, so very adaptable. But then I came to school here, spent a summer, fell in love with this sense of place and the infrastructure. But I think it all comes down to consumer. What's important now? And we keep hitting this word values or feelings and emotions. Like, you know, Lou Holtz said, win. What's important now? W-I-N. So we, back to Steinmetz, putting an X, I always say every day we're making thousands of decisions based on our value system of what is important to us. And this transaction versus transformation, and coming out of Airwalk footwear, where people were in love with a brand. And I've studied that people are in love with the brand of BMW. People are in love now with Costco. It just fascinates me that the humans are really where love is found, but how did the great marketers get us to fall in love with Patagonia? Or an automobile, the 2 tons of steel, where people are emotionally connected on a human basis with a consumer product. You talked about toothpaste. You talked about alma mater. My weekend with my mother, is priceless in a sense of just the ancestry, the heritage, the dear mother, alma mater, and my sisters. And we went and saw Neil Diamond, and I was so happy. Down in the city of Baltimore, I was with 7,000 people in real life listening to the Neil Diamond play at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Place was packed, sold out, Broadway play, and just we all were singing Sweet Caroline. And what does that bring it back to? Penn State, Beaver Stadium. And I know it's played at Fenway and just about every other stadium. But that sense and that feeling of Sweet Caroline, that Neil Diamond could touch our hearts like that through music. Now, music, I can see being in love with music, but an automobile, a vest, the Patagonia label on it, or even a shoe that said Airwalk on it for an empowered teenager. It was a 16-year-old alternative kid that skateboarded or snowboarded. But this is in real life. We're talking about in real life. We're talking about curating real life experiences, not manufactured, in this beautiful outdoor region of our slice of paradise. And so that's why we're here, trying to make our town a little better and make it a little more attractive to people to retire here. Join us in this slice of paradise.
Well, I think modern higher ed, at big universities like Penn State, are where the concepts you just discussed intersect. Because there is a lot, and I'm not condemning this by any stretch, of 20th century mass media era marketing philosophy in the way we sell Penn State pride. There's no doubt about it. There is marketing and communications departments that live by the exact same rules, all of which are taught, by the way, here at the university as well, that major corporations do in terms of how they foster a relationship with their customers. But there's life experience too. And all of the emails I get from the Alumni Association and all the We Are weekends and all the, Adidas hoopla and everything that folks are being, generously compensated to produce on behalf of Penn State, all added together, does less for my affection for the place and my wife's willingness to continue donating back a portion of our income to support it than my memories of a tailgate or my freshman year dorm friendships that have survived to this day, or those long meandering conversations over a pint at Zeno's. And so there's a depth there. There is a meaning to the, if you'll forgive the term, product that Penn State has. And when we miss that, we miss the forest for the trees.
Well, and you talk transaction and you talk about depth. You got to go deep, and that's the value, back to that word value, of Happy Valley, the potential for more of that over tailgates. Zeno's is still here. The Tavern is still here. Pine Grove Hall is here, right next to Flower and Stone. That's our whole reason for being here on this stage, is we want to amplify and connect more people to that. More people to Zeno's for that human flourishing that Ben Franklin and John Adams had.
And I am a warrior for that, Greg. That is where I am planting my flag, not either or and, right? That's one of the themes of this show. Not either transactional or transformational. It can and necessarily must be, for higher ed in the 21st century, both. It has to be both, but one has been, I would argue, shamefully neglected to a far greater degree, and it might be the more impactful and, yes, the more valuable in terms of actual dollars and cents over the long term half of the equation.
Well, we're getting down to that word soul again. What, the soul of the brand, the soul of what we're talking about for the last 55 minutes. Like, what is that? How do you feel it? How do you quantify it? It's called a value. It's called human relations. It's what we have survived for centuries, flourishing together in a cooperative way. And so everything we're talking about is we've substituted this with same-day delivery, eating, alone, Amazon, national treasure, but you don't have to leave your house. When someone dies in the neighborhood, you can just send them a gift certificate. You don't bake it anymore. It's so great that Frank is letting me store some stuff in his garage. It just reminds me that, the old days where you would actually open your garage up to someone and let them store it versus getting a storage locker, which is saving me $250 a month. So what business are we in, Chris? What are we, as Theodore Levitt asked the railroad industry, what business are you in? What business are we in here called Connect Happy Valley? Because certainly a lot of people are asking me a lot of questions like, what are you doing, Woodman? What business are you really in? Where are the vanity metrics? Hey, there's only 9 people watching this. Well, it's a startup, Do we really want vanity metrics? Do we want 90,000 people tuning into a live stream? Or do we want just 4 more people that we can connect with at a deeper level?
Well, it's the former, obviously. We want the vanity metrics because yes, you want to be able to reach people. You got to have a viable product. That's what I said.
Do they let us into their heart?
Both.
Do they have time?
Not either or, Greg, and. It's got to be transactional and transformational, because if it's purely transactional, you're doing no one any favors. You're not making anyone any better. You're just an organic robot, and you're about to be replaced with a more efficient mechanical one. If it's purely focused on the transformational without bringing any sort of market value, you're peeing up a rope. And
we have to be a nonprofit, and we have to be raising money then.
Well,
getting grants.
The best nonprofits, though, I think are both. I think nonprofits get a lousy name, and again, it's probably because a lot of folks working in that space are not executing the model in the way you would hope, and then it becomes guilt by association, which I don't like. And mostly, I think it's just, are you going to choose to set your sights high? Are you going to choose to be aspirational? Or are you going to choose to have low standards because they're easier to achieve, and so you can declare victory without having done a whole lot? And those are choices, as are most of the things in our lives. Our perspective, our attitudes, the way we experience day-to-day existence is way, way, way more in our own hands and under our own control than we often acknowledge. And it ultimately comes down to choices. And so when we're talking through the choices about how do you think about the place where you live, how do you consider the place where you go to school, and if you're somebody on the campus side of College Ave who's in charge of creating that experience, are you going to choose to view the students merely as customers or something more? Never lose sight of the fact that all of those things ultimately are on you, and it's a choice you make in your life and you make every day when you wake up.
Well said. Well said. So, 4th of July this Saturday, followed by the Arts Festival, followed by the Terry Smith event. No, that's the 25th for the Rise Above.
Which you can get your tickets at PennStateRiseAbove.org.
There's just a lot of fun activities for the rest of the summer, and back to the hallmark of Penn State. Everybody's booking their rooms if they haven't already for the 7 home games.
They've probably done that, but yes.
Probably done that, and then just one tailgate after another. And to the listening audience, I have my boys listen from Arizona and San Diego. They're planning to hopefully come back for the whiteout game, which has not been announced yet. be USC perhaps.
That's what everyone says.
You know, so mark your calendar. Love to see them back. And my other son in Pittsburgh's planning a tailgate coming on up. You know, again, the slice of paradise here. We open for business, open for love.
So connecthappyvalley.com is where you can go to track it all. Sign up for their weekly newsletter. Go to pinegrovehall.com to see the packed events calendar. Check out the seasonal menu and book your reservations. Until we talk to you next, enjoy Happy Valley, folks. Have a great day.